Hey, I'm Ashley Williams, and I'm going to tell you about all the things that you don't know about NPM. However, before I do that, I want to share that if you like these slides, you might consider checking them out. Additionally, if you're the type of person who sees a typo or something wrong in a presentation and gets like freaked out and just can't handle it, I'm on GitHub. Just file an issue, and I'll deal with it later. So yeah, you can see the slides here. I'm going to be telling you a lot of kind of tips and tricks, so you might be interested in just saving this. Now, before I go into NPM stuff, I want to talk about something amazing that happened last night. This was over at Makers Academy in London, and this is Node Together, which is a workshop that I teach to get people who are either new to Node or new to programming into Node. And in particular, we focus on underrepresented groups. And we got a tweet on our Twitter the other day that said this was one of the most diverse pictures people had ever seen of a tech community. And I was super happy. We had a great time. So we're called Node Together, and this came out of a problem that I had. So we're having a Node Interactive in Amsterdam in a few months, but we had our first Node Interactive a little while ago, and I showed up, and I was super bummed because everyone was a white dude. And it was so much, in fact, that someone took a picture of the back of me and my friends and said, "I've found the only women here." And so that was really quite a bummer. And I was like, all right, well, if we're going to get this to be a more inclusive, diverse environment, one of the best ways that at least I know of is education. So I created this initiative, Node Together. And so we've been to LA, we've been to Bangalore, India, we've been to Paris, and then we were just in London now. And I bring this up partially because right now, we kind of need your help. Part of this is kind of getting run on NPM's budget. Part of this is getting run out of my own pocket. So if you want to make the Node community more inclusive, please reach out and help us. This is our website, nodetogether.org, and this is us on Twitter. And I would love to get more people involved. All right, so on to NPM. All right, so every day, and this is kind of old stats here, around 1,800,000 install events occur. And on average, each install is about 70 packages, which if you put that together is 126 million packages. All right, that's a lot of packages. And I work at the company that is serving you all of those packages. So you might know me from Twitter. My name is AG Dubs. You can follow me at your own peril. I don't recommend it. But as it was said, I am the developer community and content manager at NPM, and you totally know what that means, right? Yeah, definitely not. These dogs are adorable, right? So what I like to say is that my job is that if you don't understand how NPM works, that's my problem. And so hopefully we'll be dealing a bit with that problem tonight. My job is to help you make sense of how we are helping you handle your dependencies. So my boss, Lori, tweeted this about 4 months ago. It was one of our biggest days that we had ever had. And what I want to point out is that it was 188 million downloads, but it was more than 2,100 downloads per second. And this is the time that I'll remind you that we have 99% uptime on the registry. So we're doing some serious ops work, which is really cool. But we're delivering more than 1.2 billion downloads a week. So we have a huge, huge ecosystem. And if you want to know what that looks like, it looks like this. And this is what VC people call a hockey stick curve. I don't know why. It's just an exponential curve. But we're spiking up there. And all of those dips, generally Christian holidays. Very strange. Anyways, so these are our numbers right now. I took this about an hour ago. The trick is that they're all bigger as of right now. But about an hour ago, we had 300,000 packages in our registry. All right. These are just huge, huge, huge numbers. All right. And module accounts was shown by Michael. This is what it was today. And as you can see, we are just way above what everybody else is doing in their ecosystem, which is fascinating. And again, as Michael said, this is because we're covering so many different types of programming. One of our biggest growth sectors is people who are doing front-end code. We're seeing people put lots of things that aren't even Node or JavaScript into packages. We're seeing CSS packages, and it's super fascinating. But in the end, the trick is that NPM is the largest package manager in the world, which is super awesome. How many people here use NPM? That's awesome. Super great. All right, so this talk, as I told you, is going to be about all the stuff that you don't know, because everybody knows npm install, right? But it turns out that there's a lot of stuff that npm can do for you that not everybody knows about. So while you might know some of the tips and tricks in here, I hope that by the time I'm done, you've learned at least one thing that's going to help improve your workflow. Because fundamentally, the goal of npm is to make you building your software faster, more maintainable, and more enjoyable. And so sometimes we deliver on that goal, sometimes we don't. But hopefully, you'll learn something in this presentation that's going to help you do that. So I'm going to start at the beginning. So in order to create a package.json, you can actually type npm init. And so often people will do this, but people don't actually know how smart this command is. This command is able to tell your deps from an already existing node modules folder. All right? It also can infer your repository from a Git repo, and it will always add keys. So if you've forgotten to do something, like you forgot to git init before you npm initted, you can just do it again. It'll always be additive. It's never going to undo something that it did. Now, this is something maybe a fair number of people know, but what a lot of people don't know is this command, which is npm init -- yes, which instead of asking you a bunch of questions, just gives you all the defaults that it assumes. And so I'm always just like, yeah, npm init -- yes, super good. So beyond that, though, what you might not know is that using a .npm init.js file, you can customize the questions that npm init asks. So if you're using npm inside your company and you want to enforce certain open source licenses, if you want to enforce certain naming things, you can actually write questions that have logic that enforce that. And you can do that right in here, which is super, super cool. All right, so another thing that I see a lot of people actually don't know is that you can use the npm install command, which we call the interactive command, to actually save things that you're interactively installing to your package.json. So you're able to save both normal dependencies and dev dependencies, and this is really neat. But what you might not know, and given that you're all developers, you want to type less, right? You can just do that and save yourself a whole bunch of time, which I think is really great. All right, so maybe now it's time to discuss the elephant in the room, that we have npm 3. How many people here are using npm 3 right now? How many people are happy about it? All right, that's interesting. All right, so with npm 3, we really changed how we manage dependencies. And unfortunately, we changed them in a way, and we didn't really describe why we did it. And additionally, the documentation was a little bit complicated. As somebody who writes the docs, I know that we really needed to explain the big changes that we made. And so, yeah, we know people are not super happy with npm 3. But here's how it works, and it actually is super awesome. So the whole idea is that we're trying to flatten the dependency tree. How many people here work on Windows? Yeah. How many people have hit max path? How many people are happy that we're going to get Linux on Windows now? Yeah, that's so cool. Super, super excited. But part of the reason that we did this is because one of the largest growing communities that's using npm are people who use Windows. And we really care about that. And so to do this, we've made it so that we have a significantly more shallow tree. What we've also done is started including deduping in how things get installed, which is extremely important. And that might not be completely obvious when you see something like this. Now, when npm 3 came out, particularly when it was released with Node 5, a lot of people were surprised because they looked at the top level of their Node modules folder, and they were like, what is all of this stuff? All right? What they were used to is looking in their Node modules folder and seeing their primary dependencies. And it turns out that you can still do that. And you can do that by using the npm ls command. So npm ls will show you your entire dependency tree, not as it is in your file system, but as it's understood by the npm ecosystem. And then if you just want to see the primary deps, you can pass depth 0. And that will give you the exact same view that you saw before when you were just looking at the Node modules folder in npm 2. All right, so here's another thing that I get a lot from people. How many people wish that they could install offline? Just a few people? Has anyone taken down like a Delta Airlines flight Wi-Fi trying to do an npm install? Because I have. It's cool, but it can get kind of tricky if you're using really large things, like lots of dependencies. It can be complicated. And so a lot of people maybe don't realize that NPM actually has a global cache on your machine. And that's in the .npm folder, usually in your root like user directory, but it'll depend on how you've installed NPM. And so the modules are stored there, but unfortunately, you can't use this offline because when you run an npm install, it's still going to go try and check the network to see if there's a new version that fits your semver expression. However, you can kind of trick this. And so you can use npm install -- cache bin, and you can pass this super big number, or you can actually write the word infinity with a capital I. And basically, this will allow you to use that global cache. So if you're on an Amtrak, or I guess that's a very American reference. I'm not sure what it's called in London. If you're on the train and you need to npm install, you could try and use this, and you're actually going to end up like having probably a better time. And we've always talked about the idea that we should alias this to npm install offline. One day we might. FYI, that does not work right now. Lots of people wish it did, and we're definitely working on that. But there's another way that you can do this too that I think a lot of people don't understand, which is that npm also offers you the ability to create a tarball out of your own package. So when you actually npm install or npm publish, you're turning your package into a tarball that's then put in the registry, and then when you install it, you're pulling it back down. And so we actually have an internal command, and it's also available publicly, is npm pack. And what you're able to do with npm pack is you take your package and it turns into a tarball, and then you can actually npm install directly from that. So if you have dependencies that you use all the time, you can just pack them up and then just have them on your machine ready to go. No need to worry about cache min or anything like that. Now, there's one little tricky thing about this, though, which is that unfortunately, pack doesn't include your dependencies. But there's this thing called bundled dependencies, which will be how you can take dependencies that you list for your package and have that code pulled down and bundled into the package you're using. So a combination of npm pack and bundled dependencies means that you can just have local copies of the packages that you need to use regularly in your project. And particularly, you'll be able to use them offline. Now, let's talk about shrink-wrap. How many people in here know what I'm talking about when I say npm shrink-wrap? All right, how many people just think this GIF is funny? Like, what is going on here? I have no idea. Someone actually sent npm's Twitter this, and I was like, I'm going to use this forever. So the idea with npm shrink-wrap is that when you're setting something up into production, you don't want to have the dependencies that you have in production or staging or testing be a different version than the ones that you're using locally. It's really not safe. You want to have exactly the same thing, and that's a good assumption to have. However, because of how npm deals with semver, that can actually be kind of tricky. So what you're able to do with npm shrink-wrap is you're able to lock down the exact version that you are using on your computer. And by lock down every version, I mean every version of every dependency all the way down the tree. Lock that down to a specific version, and then whenever you npm install, so you push whatever app you're writing up into your production server, it's going to install the exact same version that you had locally. So in case you're dealing with any package managers or owners who maybe don't do semver quite right, you don't have to worry about that. You're able to know that you're using the exact same version in both places. And what's great about this, if anyone has used shrink-wrap before, unfortunately it was a little bit unusable in npm 2 because you always had to keep doing it. However, in npm 3, if you use the -- save or save dev commands, this is going to update your shrink-wrap right away, and you won't have to shrink-wrap again. This is going to interact with that if you have it present. And that's a really awesome reason to update to npm 3 because shrink-wrap works much, much better. All right, so we get this thing a lot. How many people here have used something like Ruby Gems or Bundler? All right, so you're used to a lock file. So your question is, shrink-wrap, why is this opt-in? Why is this not a default feature? And so this is because fundamentally, npm believes in semver. We often say we are a bet made on semver, which is that generally speaking, when we're bringing in versions that are slightly more, bringing in a patch version or a feature version for you, we're getting you the bug fixes and features that should not be breaking your app. And so we believe that this, generally speaking, is a much better option than having to lock things down specifically. Though that's obviously highly contested, which is why we offer the shrink-wrap function. Now, because we love Semver so much, we've actually tried to make it much easier for you. And so if you're ever publishing something, you might be manually editing the version in your package.json, but you actually don't need to do that. In fact, you could just use the npm version command and pass in major, minor, or patch, and it will immediately increment that up for you, which is super awesome. Now, I always like to take this moment to explain Semver for anybody here who maybe doesn't understand it, which is the idea is that Semver is kind of a social contract, which says for a major version, that's breaking changes, which means that if you update, your app will probably break. And then for minor and patch, it just means that your app might break. Actually, minors feature patches, bug fix docs, but this is a little bit confusing. One thing that people often get very upset about is that when you have to update documentation and things like that, you actually have to publish a new version. And this is something we stand by as a feature, because that we believe that docs are actually part of your product. So when you are improving it by adding docs, you really should be updating the version. All right. So another thing that I think is super awesome that unfortunately I don't see enough people using, and was mentioned in a very confusing way by Michael a second ago, is npm scripts. How many people here are using npm scripts? Awesome, great. Okay, so with npm, we saw like in the original kind of JavaScript ecosystem, there were a lot of like automation tools like Grunt and Gulp. You saw Broccoli. If you think that I'm just saying random words, you're probably right. But we saw that this was a really useful thing, and so we added it, and so we have npm, and you're able to add any sort of custom script that you would like. So you can type npm run and come up with a name and define it, and this is like a great way to be able to just write shell scripts and then automatically do that. But there's a lot of other really awesome things about npm scripts that people don't know. So one of these things is lifecycle events. All right? Basically what we're able to do is we're able to have you define scripts, and then those scripts are going to be context aware. So one of the most interesting ones that I like is pre-publish. So there's things like publish, test, start, and you can do pre and post these events in the lifecycle of your package. But pre-publish is very interesting, because what it will do is it'll run something before you publish your package, but it will also run something when anybody uses your package by installing it, which is something that often can catch people by kind of off guard. But basically, it's a way if you have to do any sort of minification, any sort of compilation, you can do that during that, and it's able to hit at both of those life cycles, which is actually pretty tricky. So I find that that's very, very fun. Side note, I am currently writing like a whole bunch of docs for this, so be on the lookout for that. The other thing that's super neat is that run scripts are composable. So you're able to write a bunch of scripts, define them in your package.json, and then you can have them reference each other. All right? And that can be really great. So you don't have like a super long script like right now, like you want to hit the 80 columns, right? So you're able to compose them together. But the best part is, how many people here have had read a README and it made you install something globally? Ever? How many people have to work on a machine where installing something globally is maybe not OK? All right, yeah. So it turns out that if you want to use something that would need to be used on the command line, which is when you would probably install something globally, to make your packages more user-friendly, you can define npm run scripts that use packages that you would otherwise install globally, but install them as a dev dependency. And those dev dependencies are automatically in path for your run scripts. So you don't have to install something globally at all. Instead, just have it be a dev dependency of your project and call it in a script, and it's just right there. So it makes it significantly more accessible to a lot more people. In addition to those dev dependencies being in path, you also get all of the keys in any sort of npm config or package.json as variables for free. So you really have the full context of your project available in those scripts, which I think is super fun. So another couple of things that people don't know, and this is the part of the talk where I'm like, npm is a company. Did you know about that? Not a lot of people do. So one of the things that we've started doing is doing scoped packages, which is really just a fancy way of saying namespace packages. And in particular, we're seeing a lot of ecosystems on the front end adopting this because it helps increase the discovery of packages. How many people have used npm search? How many people are frustrated by it? Yeah, it's cool. You should just keep your hands up. We'd understand. But we're seeing tons of communities. React is doing this. Angular is doing this. And they're making it so that it's easier to find those packages because they're within that ecosystem scope. And so the way you can do this is you just npm install, and you see an @, you write the scope, and you have a name. All right? Now, scope packages are private by default, but you can make them public simply by doing this, which means that right now, if you have an npm username, you actually already have a free scope that you can publish packages under. So if you've ever really wanted a package name, but somebody else took it, you can have @your username / that package, and that's already available for you for free, which is pretty cool. Now, the thing that's not free is private modules. And while I'm a huge open source fan and I like everything to be public, sometimes it can't be. Like maybe you're at a company that has some strange auth, and you want to package that up and be able to share it and repeat it with people. So that's something we offer. Now, some people think that npm private modules is weird, right? Because we're supposed to have packages. And so modules versus packages. This was a total naming faux pas. We thought it was cute because it's like npm private modules is npm, PM. It's like recursive, yeah. It was a bad idea. We're changing it. Sorry about that, y'all. But the way you can do this to start your package with a scope is you can use that npm init command, and you can just use -- scope and pass your name right through there. And the cool thing about this is that you're able to use these private packages right alongside the public packages seamlessly, which I think is pretty neat. And so we had released this for a while, and it turned out that managing access to this stuff was super hard. Much like pouring milk in cereal is extremely difficult, clearly. So we came up with npm organizations. And so we have this thing called npm team. So the same way you can have orgs in GitHub, you're able to use orgs on npm and manage your collaborators and access to packages that way, which is super useful. All right, so we have an enterprise product. I'm not going to talk about this that much. It's pretty cool. Basically, it means that you're able to have your own registry that's behind a firewall, and you're able to have just a certain amount. You can whitelist packages so people can only use certain ones. But the cool thing about npm Enterprise is something that we just released, which is npm Enterprise integrations. And I gotta say, like, I'm not a salesperson, but I'm like really amped about this, and we're hoping to get this for the public registry really soon. But the idea is that within the npm Enterprise, we can automatically add integrations that will check for all of the open source licenses your package requires. It'll tell you if you have any obligations or if you have any dependencies that have a license that you shouldn't be using. We also have been working with the Node security team. So they're automatically like checking all of the packages for security vulnerabilities. And then we also worked with BitHound to get package metrics on here. And so, I don't know, I find that this is really cool. One of the neat things about npm is there's so many dependencies, but because there's so many, it's really hard to think thoughtfully about all of them. And so we're trying to automate that away. Now, this is only an enterprise right now, so if you don't want to pay a ton of money, I totally understand. You want to be able to do this right now, though. Like, we know that the community wants more. And the CLI and the registry are really community assets. And so what I want to end this with is kind of a call to action. First off, it was kind of a quiet release, but we have a new repo called the npm/registry repo, where first off, if you run into any problems with the registry, please file an issue here. The registry team and me are like actively answering everyone's questions about this, and it's really neat. But the other cool thing that's happening here is that I'm currently documenting the public registry API here. And so if you want to work with this data, if you want to build integrations, that's possible, and we have the data here and the docs to tell you how. One of the coolest things you can write is a registry follower, which means that every event that changes the registry, you can follow and do something about. So that could even give you all of the packages of the registry, all of the changes, and this is a follower, and it's 22 lines of Node. Just 22 lines. It's extremely easy, and at this moment, then you suddenly get access to all of these public packages. And it's super, super neat, and I encourage everyone to both write a follower, do something cool about it, and tweet at us about what you're doing, because we're excited for people to build these things. This is built off of what we call our replication endpoint, which means that if you want to mirror the npm registry, not only can you, But we encourage you to do it, and we will help you do it. This is the endpoint where you can get every single change from the NPM registry. And it's not only just public packages, but it's also all of the scoped public packages now, which is a big new change. So this is an awesome place to get just super fun data. All right. As a last thing, what I will say is we do have 99% uptime, but recently we've created this bot called NPM status that checks if your NPM is running. So if you're ever wondering, is it just me or is there something up with NPM? We tweet from this now automatically with all of our status updates. So you should definitely go ahead and follow it. So that's my talk. I hope you learned something, and please reach out. We want to see all the cool, awesome things you build. Thanks. We love you.